Greetings, friends, and welcome to this edition of Tales from the Tabletop, the video series where I scour the internet and my own personal experiences to bring you anecdotes of adventure, the fun, the funny, the farcical, the teachable moments, and I pick my favorite one and I illustrate it for your listening and viewing pleasure. Hey Gabe, what's with the crazy getup? Well, I'm glad you asked. We'll get to it later. But right now, we got some funny stories to get to, so let's do it. Our first story comes from Shikenkan, and it is titled Tomfoolery. The cast includes Jed as Gargrim, the dwarf fighter, Eric as Rurik, the dwarf druid, Scott as Donaire, the dragonborn barbarian, and me as the merciless DM. The two girls and the party's leader were absent on this day, leaving only these three young men to go at it alone. What could go wrong? These guys are close friends, and without the more sensible players to deter them from their usual foolish antics, they ended up in a heap of trouble. The players were feeling invincible after defeating a group of orcs and an ogre. They had been fooling around all session, insulting a banshee's appearance and decapitating the slain ogre in order to drag its rotting head around as a satirical trophy through the blistering summer weather. They came across a non-hostile necromancer who was studying a ruin. Though surrounded by undead minions, he was willing to speak with them. He requested their help in a quest, but having no superiors to put an end to their rampage of jokes, the trio decided they didn't want to work for a necromancer, and so they debated on whether or not to kill him and loot his camp. In a sudden turn of events, Jed decided that his dwarf didn't want to risk the fight after not fully recovering from the previous one. I thought that perhaps the trio had decided to put an end to their antics. However, they conversed and formed a new strategy. The Dragonborn Barbarians player, Scott, thought it would be hilarious to throw the festering ogre head at the necromancer's tent. Knowing that the undead were slow to move, the trio would run off giggling, leaving a bloody mess for the necromancer to clean up. They waited for the necromancer to return to his tent, barely able to stifle their laughter, then tossed the head over the undead guards and onto the stone tiles outside the necromancer's tent. The loosely attached flesh peeled off and splattered outside the tent, and the trio began laughing aloud, turning before sprinting in the other direction. Unfortunately, the necromancer cast a hold spell on Scott's Dragonborn, which froze him in his tracks. I smiled and said, "Roll initiative." A bloody fight ensued, which ended up with Eric's druid and Scott's Dragonborn bleeding out and dying. Since Rurik, the druid, was closer to him, Jed made Gargrim grab a hold of him and flee. Unfortunately for Donaire, the Dragonborn Barbarian, he was raised as a minion of the undead and now wanders aimlessly along the Sword Coast to this very day. Needless to say, when the other three players returned, they were not happy to hear that one character was dead and the other had to be resurrected, costing them a fortune in gold. Moral of the story? Never throw an ogre's head at a necromancer. And story puts a 70s prog rock song just stuck in my head. I can't not hear it.
Hey, I am the necromancer.
The chorus of that song cannot be beaten. Our next story comes from Vamir, and it is titled, Violence Becomes Us. We were playing a custom variation of D&D, mostly the same, but with simpler character creation and some different classes and abilities. We needed to get into a keep in the woods, with guards at every entrance, without one of them raising the alarm. We had Jason the Ranger, Derek the Rogue, Robert the Druid, Nick the Barbarian, and Sharda, me, the Healer. Now, I'm not saying that I have violent tendencies, but when playing a game, I like to knock heads and blow things up. Knowing this, the DM assigned me the Healer class to broaden my character range. His healers were not allowed to pick up any weapons, not even a knife. His rationale being the character was so weak, the only weapon at my disposal was a very large tome of spells that I kept on me. It was enchanted to allow me to lift it. No damage spells, buff and heal only. I was a little sore at the handicap, but trying new things can be fun, so I went with it. Hey, good for you, OP. Make some lemonade. I like it. Accept the challenge. Well done. The plan was simple. 2 guards stood at the least protected entrance. If we took down one and not the other, they would blow their horns and we'd be dead. Solution? Why take the risk of missing a roll when you can split them up? The Barbarian, seeing this as a stealth mission, wisely chose to stay in the woods. I was to get one guard away from his post and let the rogue deal with him, while the ranger and the druid took care of the other. We waited until nightfall. I played the lost girl in the woods and asked if someone could escort me, if not to the village that I was looking for, then at least to the main road. One of the guards agreed, and away we went. The druid tried to pull off a fancy maneuver and ended up snapping his own neck before the action even began. Multiple critical fails and too much show will do that to a character. All the luck went to the ranger, who natural 20'd his shot and killed his guard instantly. His job being done, the ranger kicked back and decided to wait until the rest of us returned. Don't mind us, we'll be fine, ya luck-stealing bastard. Back to me, the healer, and the guard escort. I pretend to trip and ask for the guard to give me a hand up. This gives the rogue a chance to come up from behind. He chose to use a black egg, which is basically a smoke bomb you crush into your hand, blow the powder towards your enemy, and it contains a paralyzing agent. The rogue fails the roll, and the wind blows the powder away, but it made enough noise to alert the guard. So there stands our rogue, exposed and panicking. He makes a few more attempts to take down the guard before he sounds the alarm, but is met by failing roll after failing roll. I was getting quite frustrated at this point, feeling very powerless, barred from attacking, and itching to join the fray. I turned to the DM and asked, "So, how big is my tome again?" He told me it was 2 feet by 1 foot and a good 6 inches thick. Is it decorated? He tells me yes, with metal on the cover and around the trim. Excellent! I whack the guard over the head with it. He couldn't think of a way or a reason to stop me from attacking, so the dice were rolled and the die was cast. I got something like an 18. Down went the guard, dazed, but still conscious. The barbarian charged from the woods and gave the poor guy another good lump to the head to rectify that. We eventually made it to the castle and completed our mission. Moral of the story? Don't be flashy, but do be creative. You will live longer. Our next story comes from World Gone Away, who this user's been a source of a lot of my favorite stories, and so World Gone Away, wherever you are, I wish you a high five and a hug. I had one player that was unnecessarily arrogant, condescending, and just a downright pain in the ass. This was back in 2nd edition. What? Rollin' Thaco, killing Dracos! I'm gonna keep working on these. If you've got better ideas, let me know. When 3.0 came out, I pretty much kicked him out of my group in the most polite way I could figure. It hurt me because this guy helped me transition into the first long-running game I've ever had. Transitioned me from the death of my first character ever, and when I decided to try my hand at being the DM, he was very helpful in helping me become the DM I am today. But he was an F-bomb douchebag. He was most definitely that guy on just about every level. The kind of guy that if he talked louder than you and dismissed you with more volume than the other people, he automatically thought he won the argument. He ended up playing a female tiefling as all of his PCs, and he always made sure that she was enshrouded inside of a sphere of darkness, literally 24/7. I really don't know what he got out of this, but it wasn't until I decided to put my foot down and make it so that he couldn't railroad me into doing what he wanted. I started reading the book. I started reading all of the books. This is where I learned a lot about how I was actually supposed to run the game. This guy never got anything over another player character ever again. I demanded that he explain the mechanics, and whenever he argued a point, I made sure I pulled up the relevant article, and I started holding him to the book. Sometimes you really need to have a player versus player situation to make that happen. So how do you crush somebody with this mentality when they go toe-to-toe with a buddy of yours in the game as long as you have been with a grudge against that particular player? You want to do that? You let that happen. Problem player in question uses every illusion spell in the book for 6 rounds. The other player readies their action and casts True Seeing. All of the illusions, that is, all of the illusions are ineffective. The top comment on this one had a pretty good point. I'd like to share it with you. They present it in a little skit. Player 1, I attack player 2. DM, awesome. Let me roll you up a new character sheet real quick. Player 1, what? I said I attacked. Why are you... Oh, no. You need to roll a new character. You see, this character no longer has a reason to justify being in a part of the party or the campaign. As discussed, one must justify their character being a part of the party from the beginning. If at any point it doesn't make sense, your character comes under my control. So you need to roll a new one. But what? I feel for OP in this one. I've definitely had this happen to me in high school, where I've had some friends who are very good friends who did a lot for me that I was really grateful for. But as so often happens, maturing happens in different ways and different rates, and we started growing apart. And this, some of the friends that I had were just like, yeah, he's a sweet guy, when you get to know him. But yeah, no, he's a douchebag, and I know that I was that guy for a lot of other people too. He's a nice guy when you get to know him, but yeah, no, I'm definitely guilty of much douchebaggery in my youth. Hopefully I've grown out of most of my douchebaggery, but here I am on YouTube wearing sunglasses on camera. So, maybe not all the way. I also think that the commenter's solution on what to do with that guy when they engage in PvP, okay, that character's done. You need a new character now who won't do that stuff. I'm not sure if I would implement it myself, but I think it's kind of brilliant, and I could definitely see tables and players where that would be the best of all possible moves. So, kudos. This next story comes with a caveat. There's a crying alert on this one. This story punches me right in the feels in a big bad way. It's happy tears, but it's very touching, and I have to share. Because when you come across stories of real life heroes, you have to share. There's a unicorn chaser after this, so don't go anywhere. The story is titled, How Our Lovable Meathead Made Our DM and Me Cry. posted on a throwaway account in hopes of anonymity and the privacy of our story's hero. Our fighter barbarian has no issues doing what it takes to win a fight. Dive into frigid waters and wrestle some troglodytes? Sure. Hit an orc chieftain below the belt? Ha! Just try and stop him. But he suffers from one weakness. We learned he grew up an orphan and survived on the scraps he could find to get by. Because of this, he developed a soft spot for those who couldn't help themselves, especially the poor and the young. Our DM decided to test this. Upon our party entering a town sieged by raiders the day before, we found a collection of newly made orphans taking shelter in the ruins of a church of Bahamut. The kids were abandoned by the city, its inhabitants too concerned with their own losses to hold any sympathy for these poor things. The cleric healed their wounds, and the druid, me, fed them with goodberry. Like the frozen custard? It's probably not the frozen custard. The orphans thanked us for our kindness. We offered to let them travel with us until we could find a safe place for them. However, they told us they were afraid to venture outside the city walls, after seeing what came from beyond them, meaning the raiders. What they really wanted to do was travel via ship to the neighboring city across the ocean and join its temple, as it seemed a much better option than remaining where they were. We agreed to help them find a ship and secure passage, only to find out that the only ship's captain around was a crook himself and demanded 100 gold pieces per child. Unfortunately, 2 sessions ago, we spent the majority of our money buying supplies and items. Between all of us, we had 240 gold total, at least 400 short. Our fighter decided to barter with the captain and offered his great sword in trade. After rolling a natural 20 on the persuasion roll, the captain became so overcome with the fighter's generosity that he ferried the children across for 100 gold total. After a short pause, the DM remarked that he expected the fighter to strong-arm the captain, not barter, and asked why he chanced losing his very expensive weapon for a bunch of nameless NPCs. Fighter smirked and said the line we all usually dread to hear. It's what my character would do. We later found out that every one of those kids went on to become paladins and clerics, and upon ending the campaign and allowing all of us to choose how we wanted to wrap things up, Fighter decided to seek out those kids. They remembered him, expressed their gratitude to him for taking pity on a bunch of orphans, when no one else would even look at them. He told them, "But you are not orphans. You became my children that day. It's me who should be thanking you for giving me the family that I never had." It is so hard to read this with a lump in your throat. It's at this point that I want to point out just why this hit the DM and myself as hard as it did. The fighter didn't just play an orphan. He lived it. It was his real story. It wasn't far off from his character. You may be wondering why I'm telling this story and not him. Other than the fact he was always too humble to ever take any credit for anything. 20 years ago, he adopted the DM and myself. It is thanks to him we were able to stay together and have the life that we did. I'll always be grateful to him for his kindness. A true hero, if ever there was one. We lost him very recently. And finally, writing this out has been a small form of therapy to me. If you've made it this far, thank you for reading. And don't forget, it is not blood alone that makes a family. The most powerful magic is and has always been love. I had to share this story because it's one of the great reasons we play D&D, is because there we get to be the heroes. We get to do things that are heroic and that have a tangible, positive impact on the world that we made together. And because in life it is so much harder to do that, and in life we don't have the opportunity to do it as much, and in life so much of our acts of kindness and love, we don't get to see exactly how much they affect our loved ones or our community around us. And in real life, we still need heroes. And so that's why anytime I find a story of a real life hero, I have to share it. We all need heroes. At time of filming, I recently lost my father-in-law. Truly a remarkable character. And he was a literal genius. He was a musician. He was a lifelong teacher. He was a mathematician. He spent a small amount of time as a theologian. He was going to go to seminary and train to be a priest. He was a restaurateur. He owned a pizza place, sold it off to a friend of his, and his friend has kept the recipes. His recipes are still used at that pizza restaurant to this day, and it's still one of the best in town. He was outgoing and warm and full of love and very friendly and very encouraging. And I didn't get a whole lot of that growing up, but he gave some of that to me in a way that really made a difference, especially when I approached him and my wife's mother to say that, hey, I want to marry your daughter. We were very young at the time. I wasn't sure how that conversation would go, and he very warmly let me know that I was welcome into his very large, very tight-knit family. In addition to all of this stuff, he was a snazzy dresser. By way of, for instance, here's a couple of pictures. In the past couple of years, I tried to take more of an effort into my wardrobe, and I got some things that looked cool when I ordered them. Things like this vest and this frilly shirt. But when it arrived, I would say, I don't think I could pull that off. And my father-in-law would say, you know, you'd have an excellent chance of pulling it off if you just put it on. Look, I'll put it on, but I still don't know. He's like, wear it like it belongs on you. Throw down some swagger. Just do it. You look great. You look great. And this is his hat. My wife said that she thought it fit me particularly well. And this is a vest I wasn't sure I could pull off. And this is a shirt that I'm not sure I could pull off in public outside of Halloween. But the next time I go and play darts at my favorite bar, this is the outfit I'll be bringing with me. And I'll bring a little of my father-in-law's swagger with me. All right, y'all. Whew, shake it out. Shake it out. Criminy. We're supposed to come here to have fun. We can't end there. The whole point of this series is to have fun and share fun stories that are positive and uplifting, and I've got just one hell of a unicorn chaser to share with you. This story comes from Fouchard 1520, and it is titled, Awakened War Dog Gets a Treat. So there we were, the good boys of our Dungeons and Doggies campaign. We had just beaten a sinister foe known as the Mailman. It was loot time, and my awakened cane corso barbarian rogue was set to get the biggest chew toy of them all, a custom magic item tailored for yours truly. I looked it up. The cane corso is an ancient Italian breed. It's a great big, solid, mastiff-looking dog. And during the days of the Roman Empire, they were employed as auxiliary warriors in the Roman army. So, fun facts. You see, my big bad Roman war dog was a gladiator by training and by inclination. He loved nothing better than grappling his opponents, ripping their throats out, and sharing the meat around with the rest of the party. I mean pack. The image of this muscle-bound war dog with a muzzle slathered in gore inspired my GM with a bit of homebrew. Being a fan of the classics, he set about building me a bit of kit based on Frank Frazzetta's The Death Dealer. It was a magic helm with glowing eyes and bad attitude. With a nod and a wink to my good boy's gladiatorial showmanship, he made it an intimidation item, figuring I could use it to strike fear into the hearts of my enemies. So, to get the fear effect, I need to roll on charisma, right? I asked. Yeah, pretty cool, right? Replied the DM. Oh, it's absolutely cool. Super badass. Love it to pieces. The only thing is, I have a +0 to my charisma. But see, it's a bonus action 3 times a day. There's not much of a cost, so it's just a nice thematic bonus, assured the DM. I could feel my inner min-maxer hackles rising. I scented optimization in the wind. I summarily marked my territory all over that poor GM's tailored item and said, "Hey, Warlock, you've got your charisma maxed out, right?" And that is the story of how an awakened Fey Corgi got to wear the helm of the Death Dealer. Her little Bork transformed into a great big woof, and no enemy could stand before her. So like most illustrators of a certain genre, like most metalheads, like most fantasy fans, of course, I am a huge fan of Frank Frazetta. Just huge. Visiting the Frazetta Art Museum in Pennsylvania is on my bucket list. I hope to make that happen next year sometime. And The Death Dealer, for those of you who don't know, is one of his most famous paintings and most famous characters. And to the point where The Death Dealer as a character has recently been rebooted in a comic. I don't know if that series is still going or if it went well, but I guarantee in 10 years or less, they'll try again, because such is the power of the image of the Death Dealer. And to put that image, that helmet, on a tiny, stumpy, fluffy-butted corgi, I mean, I live for this. I did my best to channel my inner Frazetta, which, let's be real, you can only imitate Frazetta, and it's only poor imitations at best. But I gave it my best, and I'm happy with my own result, and I hope that you are too. I hope you enjoy it very much. If you would like the original art from this episode, then please find it on my website at coffeeandhate.biz. Click store at the top. If you have any opinions on the outfit, then hey, that's what a comment section is for. And in the meantime, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for listening. May your dice roll high and never be cursed. Swore I wouldn't be one of those guys who cries on the internet.